Hello Popcorn Junkies, welcome to this review of a horror film that's kind of slightly gone beneath the radar this year, what with things like Weapons and Bring Her Back and The Conjuring that's coming and Megan 2 and all those kind of movies. This is a film called Together. This is the first feature film by Australian director Michael Shanks, and he has something in common with the Philippou brothers who made Bring Her Back and Talk to Me, in that he's Australian and he's a YouTuber. Oh my God, what's going on with the Australian YouTube algorithm? Bloody hell, how to describe it? It's a supernatural horror film that pivots around codependency and love. And it's not often that you actually get a horror film that kind of breaks away from genre conventions in terms of thematics or topics. Yes, it's supernatural, but in terms of like, it's not obviously demonic, it's not obviously house possessed, it's not obviously a zombie film or a monster film. It's just fucking weird. And it's all the better for that. It's very, very, I'm going to say it from the outset, this is very original. It stars Dave Franco and Alison Brie, who are married or are partners in real life, which, given the fact that this is a film about togetherness and the extent to which togetherness can become something quite horrifying, what better casting than having two actors who are actually married? Makes total sense. So, Aussie filmmaker, YouTube sensibility, real life couple at the heart of this, and this film opens with an opener that kind of is riffing on, for me it was a kind of opener that kind of took me back to that moment where a dog's face split like a banana or was peeled open like a banana in so many different directions in The Thing. Do you remember that, the John Carpenter Thing, when the dog's face just splits open? Anyway, this film starts with a brilliant enigma. A couple goes missing, a couple of search dogs have drunk from the water of a ravine or a kind of hole in the floor in the middle of the wood, and their heads have fused. That you don't really get a clear sight of it to begin with, you just get a distinct sense in the pre-titles, if you like, of, oh my God, why are those two dogs kind of panting and sort of together? So as I say, this starts with a kind of a prologue and a prelude about a previous couple who've gone missing, and these dogs who were part of the search party have something awful's happened to them because they drank the water in this ravine. And so we meet Dave Franco and Alison Brie, a couple. He's a kind of down on his luck muso, kind of, sort of still pursuing rock star dreams, perhaps a little bit older than he should be. She's a teacher, or she works in education, and the film starts with essentially they're about to kind of leave the city and head off for a job that she's got. And very much from the get-go, Franco is the beta. He's not the alpha male, he's the beta male. He can't drive. He's kind of emasculated even by his friends who are kind of members of the band, when they say, there's one line where they say something like, when I die, I really want my life to flash before my eyes rather than someone else's. The suggestion being that Dave Franco's only living in the shadows of his wife, Alison Brie. And so we have this kind of farewell party. They're being sort of waved off and all this. And Alison Brie he turns around Dave Franco, and there's Alison Brie kind of going, will you stay with me forever? She's clearly more into this. She's more romantically inclined. We discover recently lost his parents. And so he's a bit jagged. He's a bit kind of disorientated. He's not really present. He's distracted. And he doesn't respond in the right way in front of the crowd. And that's the first awkward moment where you're like, oh, embarrassing or what? And there's a kind of unease between the two of them. There's the idea that they could split. She says to him, well, we could split. First use the word split together. She says we could split, before I go away, sort of suggesting that her sort of geographical job move, she could just go it alone. I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't seen anything as frightening as the first scare in this film this year. I know all these other films have been championed and talked about, and Weapons has been described as kind of inventive. It isn't. Bring Her Back as a strong follow-up to Talk to Me. It wasn't. But the first scare scene in this film, oh my God, is a nightmare. He's having a nightmare, Dave Franco's character. And he sees at the end of his bed, at this elongated long bed, at the end in the distance with another bedhead, a sort of eyes bulging out, kind of batshit crazy, weirded out, clown-like faced image of his mother. And alongside her is a dead corpse-like thing. And then he kind of tries to hide, and then he hides, pulls the covers over his head. And then as he looks under the covers, his mother comes flying up. But what I liked about this first jump scare, and boy is it a jump scare, and boy is it a creepy scare too. If you're worried about things under beds, on beds, at the end of beds, this is not a film for you, because it was just truly unsettling. But that first nightmare was really clever, because in the filming of it, they earmark a shift of tone, if you like. There's a moment where we go into the dreamlike state. He looks at the back of Millie, his wife, played by Alison Brie, and suddenly the colour tones change. So we're given a clear gear change that, hang on, things aren't as they seem. And even though they gave us that notification, if you like, it didn't diminish the horror. They head off, they get to their new house. Classic kind of fucking horror film stuff. They get in. I mean, this film moves at a lick. Every single scene starts with, or has an enigma, or has a horrific development, or has a hugely important character development. There's no padding, and there's no padding in this film. There's no scenes which are like, you know, in many horror films, you'll get moments where you're like, oh, fuck me, that was scary, but a couple of scenes where we can all kind of regather our spirits, and basically the producers can say, save on the fucking budget, so we can have a few ordinary scenes so we're not splashing all our cash. But no, this film just kind of moves from fucking lurches from scene to scene to scene, and everything that develops is brilliantly executed. He still doesn't want to have sex with her, Millie. He doesn't want to have sex with Millie, and you're like, well, why? And it's because he's missing his mum and dad. His dad's dead, and his mum, something's happened to his mum, and so he's distracted. He's kind of not himself. He's not himself, and he's emasculated. You know, he's trapped. He can't drive, and now they're in the woods, and he can't even really get his music together. You know, he's hapless. She heads off to work. She meets her sort of boss, or the guy who offered her the job, Jamie. He says to her in the kind of staff room, "Oh, you must go hiking, and I'm a neighbour of yours. In fact, I am the neighbourhood, so I'm going to come round and see you." And they decide to go hiking. They go for a hike. It rains. They get trapped. They fall down a fucking hole. Once again, we're reminded that he's not the big I am man. He's not an alpha man. He's trying to use his kind of compass on his phone. He's hapless. He's not the guy you want who's going to look after you. He's not butch. He's not macho. And I like that. I think Dave Franco played a very sort of, in terms of masculinity and machismo, a very unvain performance. He was willing to be, I mean, all of his clothes, he always looks a bit sort of angular and a bit weak. And they fall into the same fucking cave that the dogs were in earlier in the film, where we saw them lick the water. Suddenly their heads fused together. So you kind of know shit's going to go down. Whilst down there, they fall. Whilst down there, he loses his phone. They have a moment together. Really neat, intimate moments. I mean, obviously they're married, and so I think they've acted in another film together as a couple. It's very naturalistic. It's very real. It's very authentic. It does add a certain sort of, there's a familiarity and intimacy to their exchanges that's really nice. So you just feel very much at ease. There's no egginess in their kind of dialogue. He shares, there's another really horrendous moment about his parents. I mean, fucking hell, you've had the dogs at the beginning, you've had his mum at the end of his bed in his nightmare, and now you get his parents again, as he retells a really gory story about finding his mum in bed with his dead dad. Oh my God, her eyes on stalks. Oh my God, it's all just so, it's so creepy. The bed stuff is so creepy. And of course, whilst down there, he drinks from the water, and you're like, no, don't drink from the water. It's kind of earmarked as being significant because it's filmed upside down in the reflection, and you're like, oh no, he's drinking from the water and she's not. And then they fall asleep in this cavern. And when they wake up, they're kind of stuck a little bit to each other. You get that first sense of stickiness. And this is sticky as in like glue, or as he calls it, mildew. You know, there's just that, it just sort of sticks. It's like if you had Pritt stick. Look like a Pritt stick had been run down their legs, but they've stuck together a bit, and they're like, what the fuck is that all about? And so they have this sticky moment, and they have this moment where there's a lot of breathing in this scene. I started to get asthma in this scene. There's a lot of breathing. It's in the trailer. He's breathing, and then what you discover is that as he breathes, so does the sort of the cavernous walls of this underground lair. Kind of, they breathe too, and you're like, what is this? Is this the intestinal innards of a earthy creature? And as he breathes, and then you have this moment where he turns to Millie, and she's like this. And it's so fucking weird and scary and just really unnerving. And as I say, it was in the trailer. And even though these bits or moments were in the trailer, it didn't ruin just how genuinely kind of unsettling this film is. It was such an unsettling moment. And it was only her breathing. And then he comes to, and it's another nightmare. And then they get out and they go home. And then we have quite a few sort of moments or sequences where that kind of something's clearly gone afoot awry. Something weird has happened to Tim. He's drunk this water. He massages her shoulders at one point and gets a bit too into it, virtually breaking her shoulders off. He goes and has a shower. She drives off to school, and every time she does a right or a left turn, he swings at right angles in the shower, smashing his head. That didn't really work for me quite so well, because I think what begins to dawn on us is the fact that from drinking this water, like magnets, and due to codependency, and sort of an analogy, if you like, for codependency, he's drawn to her. He can't sort of be away from her. And I think the idea around her driving off was that there was a wall between her moving away from him and him being drawn towards her. He was kind of being drawn towards her like a water diviner, a bit like the compass. If you think about the compass at the beginning, actually, he goes to look for a compass that's north. The whole idea is that wherever she is, she draws him towards her. The shower scene was less effective, but his obsession with her is really good. He becomes darkly and disturbingly obsessed with her, even, having not had any interest in having sex with her, he suddenly can't get enough of her. And then that night, later that day, Jamie, her colleague, comes around. There's quite, another really, some of the naturalistic dialogue scenes were really, really believable. When her work colleague comes around, he brings a bottle of wine, and then there's real tension between, Millie and Tim, Dave Franco and Alison Brie, as they talk about him. He talks about being almost hostage, or, he's the cook, and he can't leave and she can, and it gets a bit orcs. It's like you feel like you're actually sat with a couple having a genuine row, so you feel for Jamie, her work colleague, who's kind of observing this going, fucking hell, okay, are you two happy here or not happy here? And so you get a real sense of argy-bargy between Dave Franco and Alison Brie. But then when her work colleague goes, Dave Franco, in a bit of a kind of frisson way, says he kind of liked you, didn't he? He kind of fancied you. And then that turns him on, and then they start to snog, and then they kiss, and then their lips stick together. So we're getting this graduated sense of stickiness and togetherness, and they're sort of almost being pulled towards each other, or certainly he's being pulled towards her. And then it's gig day. She drops him off at the station. He can't go. He looks like a crack addict. He's sweating. He's falling apart. His eyes are black. He looks, he's like a complete, because she drops him off at the station, all of his symptoms are like withdrawal symptoms. He is like a crack addict, which interestingly, I've been to Codependence Anonymous, which is a 12-step program for people who are addicted. A lot of people with addiction issues have codependency issues, not just on the chemical or the alcohol, but on people in their lives. They attach to people. You become, it's why jealousy happens. It's why you get fearful and all this kind of stuff, obsessive and all that. And I thought what was quite neat, it didn't amplify this aspect at all, really. It didn't talk about it. It's not there for you to kind of analyse. But I took from it a lot. I related a lot to the almost drug-like withdrawal symptoms that Dave Franco's character goes through when he's nowhere near his wife, or nowhere near his partner, And so when she's far from him, he just can't cope. He's got the DTs, he's having a fucking, he's trying to take tablets. He's seen the doctor who's given him all these diazepam to kind of cope with, kind of, relax his muscles and help him kind of not stress. Anyway, so he doesn't get on the fucking train, and then she's at school and she looks out the window. It's really effective. He's wandering through the playground. All the kids are in the playground. You're thinking, oh my God, no, you can't come into a playground. There are kids here. And then a relatively unbelievable scene develops. But its unbelievability is overwhelmed by the sheer horror of what ensues. They go into an infant's toilet cubicle, and they start to have sex. And you always wonder, don't you, when you're watching a kind of real couple having sex, you're thinking, did you really have sex? Anyway, so they're having sex and they're really going at it. And everyone in the audience, when I was watching it, was thinking, hang on a minute, when he kissed her, his lips stuck. When they were lying on the floor in the cavern, their shins stuck. Now he's got his penis inside her. What the fuck's going to happen now? And it doesn't disappoint. They get stuck to each other. His penis gets stuck inside her. You even get a cutaway looking down of his POV as he's trying to pull his penis out. It's being stretched. It's just like, and this is a 15 certificate, can you believe it? And Bring Her Back was an 18. What the fuck's going on there? So they get caught, and they nearly get caught. Kid comes in, then her work colleague comes in. She's bleeding. She manages to finally pull him out. I mean, I kind of found that a little bit unbelievable. Part of me was wondering, oh my God, is his penis in her? Has it been pulled off? Have we got a kind of, is it Bobbit situation here? Oh my God, it was so excruciating. It was like everyone in the audience was wincing and squealing and screaming and laughing. And it's just really quite dark and twisted and fucking, oh my God, body horror in all the wrong ways. She goes round to apologise to her boss and says, look, it's women's issues, though we know that he knows that we know that she had a penis stuck inside her. We get to meet Jamie, her boss, and there's this curious photo of him and his partner when they were younger. They kind of both look like him in a sort of weird fashion. He wants to show her his kind of wedding video, and he talks in, not riddles, but he talks about the myth of unity. He talks about the importance of completing yourself and meeting your other half and the better half, the notion of becoming one, you know, the idea of marriage. One ring binds us all. And now they've had sex, presumably, I think the logic runs in this that he's infected her with whatever it was he had. And so now the two of them, whereas he was previously the magnet being drawn to her, the two of them are now ineluctably drawn to each other with catastrophic consequences. And that's really the final act of the film, is really the process of them becoming more and more drawn to each other, more and more physically enmeshed with each other. And then you get a really, really effective protracted scene where they enforce this distance. It's a bit like me and Nads, you know, she's snoring, I can't sleep, she says I'll sleep in the spare room. I'm like, but we never thought we'd become the kind of couple that slept in different rooms. We're becoming like my grandparents. And she sort of slaps me about a bit and says, oh, for fuck's sake, pull yourself together and grow up, you idiot. But anyway, so they take themselves down to opposite ends of the corridor. But in the middle of the night, he's flipping round and being dragged down the hall like a magnet, drawn towards the door of Millie, and then suddenly Millie's door opens and she fucking does the, what's it called, when you do the crab, and she flips back in her body and their bodies contorting, and they come down the corridor, and then their hands and arms connect, and they go into each other. And I have to say, I thought the special effects in this were fucking excellent. The sounds, the kind of, it wasn't just sinews, it was tendons, it was bony stuff. It was the sound you imagine skin would make when it's being pulled away from bone. A sort of tearing sound and a crunching sound and a knuckly sound. Isn't that horrible? Knuckly sound. You see their hands kind of, and they're trying to stop it. And then suddenly he has an idea. Get the pills that the doctor gave me, the muscle relaxants. She says, what are they? It's a really funny moment, actually. If only my mum could see this, because she's into all of her painkillers. She goes to him, what are they? Are they Valium? He goes, no, they've changed their name. They're diazepam now. It's like they go into that detail. They take these pills and they manage to sort of pull apart, you think, until the next day. And then really the next day after this night is where this film goes completely gonzo. For the last act of this film, this is gonzo body horror. You see it in the trailer, she gets that kind of electric saw and then she has to split their arms apart. She decides to head off and find her keys to go to A&E. They're going to go to the doctors, but she's left her keys at her work colleague's, Jamie, the guy who's on his own and so always talking about being together and one and finding your other half and being one and being whole and becoming whole. Oh God, she's got to go to his gaff. Meanwhile, Dave Franco decides, I know what to do, I'll go back to the ravine. At this point, we get into body horror everywhere. Whilst she's at Jamie's gaff, Jamie reveals that he's done something with his partner that means he is him and his partner. So you're cross-cutting. So while she's going through the kind of life-threatening situation of Jamie, her work colleague, who's been fused with his partner, and that's why there's a photo of the two of them, and you're thinking, oh my God, he looks like both of them, because he is both of them. And you're like, oh my God, this is so horrific. He's standing there, she punches him in the face, there's something's happened to his face, and you don't know what. There's so many great moments in this film where you're just sort of like, what was that? I didn't quite see it, but I don't want to see it. And then you cut back to him and he's in the ravine, and guess what comes out the fucking wall of the fucking ravine? The very same monster from the end of The Substance, which is all Demi Moore, rotting boobs, mouths where they shouldn't be, and fused bodies and flesh and body parts flapping around in a way that's really quite disgusting. What we discover is the fused bodies of the two original hikers are still in the ravine, and they start to come for him. There's tits hanging out, there's hands and faces all split open because they've fused, but they haven't fully fused. And so this just becomes total gonzo madness. Finally, they manage to get back together at their house. And then the final scenes of this film, they return to each other. And the film makes a really good effort of kind of, you know, keeping the logic of their kind of magnetism, if you like, and their codependency and togetherness. You know, when she bleeds, the blood sort of goes towards him across the table. When she bleeds on the floor, it's kind of reaching towards him. When he's holding her and she's bleeding, the blood is crawling across him. And so you've just got this feeling that whatever they do, they can't escape this ultimate togetherness. It's like, how together do you want to be? This film makes you scared of being with anyone. I wouldn't want to become Nadia. Not the way she farts. And so as this film moves towards its ineluctable end, part of you's thinking, they can't be going where I think they're going. Because by this point, you're sort of thinking, well, what's gone on with him? What's going on with the guy? Okay, you know, is he, why, where's his husband? Why is there that photo? What was he talking about being one? And you sort of think, God, so maybe something like this has happened to him, but is he one half of those two? Or is he, and then suddenly you realise a penny dropped for me about 10 minutes from the end where you go, oh my God, this is going to go there. I love this detail. He gets a copy of the Spice Girls out, To Become One. That's the song. To become one, I need somebody like I never needed you before. You know, that song. Gets that out, puts it on the record player. And then we have this incredibly sort of intimate, horrific, but quite tender scene in which their bodies, literally, their hands go into each other's bodies. It's quite visceral. You see his hands in and under her skin, pulling and fusing with her shoulder blades and her ribs. You can hear the ruptures and the kind of cracks and the tears as their bodies come together. And then there's that incredibly beautiful shot. So it's actually an absolutely sort of magical shot of their eyes, and then their eyelashes, they enmesh, and then their eyes fuse, and you're like, oh, this is happening all the while. You've got the Spice Girls singing da 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 da, and then they cut to a really sedate wide in this kind of quite calm interior now, and you've got these two contorted bodies with Dave Franco's eyes like that, literally like I'm looking at, and they're all like one, and then it goes to quiet. And I'm like, fucking hell, this film's mental. And what a finale. You know, car rolls up, a few days later, you think, what's happened? What's going on here? Or a couple of hours later, it's her parents, they've come to see them, welcome them into their new house. They open the front door, and there comes someone who's one person, but is basically both of them. If you go with the process of togetherness, you just become one. To become one, as the Spice Girls sing. I never thought a Spice Girls song would become so profoundly philosophical. And there you have it. This was a win-win-win. This film for me was the richest, most thought-provoking, entertaining, funny, but not stupid, gonzo at times, but not so gonzo all the way through it that you didn't take it seriously or that you weren't invested. This was a brilliantly inventive, thought-provoking, incredibly tense, forever newly surprising. Every scene would surprise you with a new evolution. And what was really clever about this film was, as each horror or bit of horror kind of came towards you, you would reflect on another bit and go, that's what that is. I've forgotten to mention there's a hideous scene where he's choking or swallowing all of her hair, and it's going into his throat, and it's kind of almost ripping into his stomach and stuff like that, and it's like they have to pull it out and they have to cut it, and it really powerful sort of fairy tale horror in there. Never leaves the boundaries. Their performances are so real that you're really invested in their relationship, and so you're invested in the horror, and you're kind of willing them to survive. And at the same time, even though you've got this kind of nagging doubt that this film's called Together, everything's together, and then you think, oh my God, this is where it's going, and it goes there. It goes there. And I have to say a big shout out to Dave Franco and Alison Brie, and also Damon Herriman, who plays her work colleague. They were sensational, really naturalistic. The tone of the film I found brilliant. As I say, it was gonzo, but not dismissible. Sometimes when you get a gonzo horror film, you're really there. I mean, I'm thinking of films like Terrifier and even Final Destination, where you're just like, oh yeah, come on then, hit me, give me what you've got, hit me with the next best thing you can shock me with. Yes, this was shocking, but you also cared. You were genuinely curious to know where this would end up. It wasn't just about, oh yeah, there's the horror. So it was plausible. The tension of togetherness was real and believable, and it wasn't dismissible. I didn't find that I left that kind of subject alone. It's body horror, but it also makes you genuinely think about codependency and the extent to which you can live your life as one. I mean, me and Nadia are very codependent. And as I say, it was funny, but it wasn't goofy. And it had that sort of, in many ways, I would say that this was a much tighter film than something like The Substance, which I thought was it just lost the plot, quite literally, and there was no plot, whereas this was tightly plotted right up to the end. Yes, there were some implausible moments, but I thought this was great fun. It was great horror. It was brilliantly visual. It was beautifully executed. It moves at a lick, and there's not a wasted scene. Even if there isn't obvious horror in every scene has something very, very interesting and relevant to the overall storyline. So if I was to score this by far, of Bring Her Back, which I was really excited about, Weapons I was really excited about, this trumps those two other films completely. And I would give this 98 out of 100.